Okay, so our first section then is authentication and authorization. So the first slide really is just, what are we talking about? And authentication is just the process of proving that you are who you say you are. So how do you prove that? There's three different ways you can prove that you are who you say you are. Something that you know, like a password or a PIN number. Something that you have, like a smart card or a token, a key fob of some kind. Or perhaps something that you are, which they call biometrics. So thumbprint, fingerprint, picture password, retina scan, all the crazy things you see in the movies, that's all biometrics. So, and you can combine these things. If you combine them, it's called multi-factor authentication. So one of the things we'll talk about, for example, is a virtual smart card. So the smart card, you put in your smart card, and then you also have to put in a PIN number. So it's dual-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, and that's a more secure way of authenticating your users. So that's authentication. Authorization is we know who you are, what should you have access to? And that's where we get into access control lists. This is where we get into permissions, like NTFS permissions, shared folder permissions, Active Directory permissions, etc. So authentication is proving that you are who you say you are. Authorization is we know who you are, what should you have access to? Okay, so our next slide talks about our different authentication protocols. So we've got Kerberos, NTLM, or certificates. Now, Kerberos has been around as an open standard for quite some time. Microsoft introduced that into the Active Directory authentication mechanism in 2000, so it's been out for quite a while now with Microsoft too. And we have a slide coming up on what Kerberos is all about. Prior to Kerberos, we had NTLM, and if you're not in a domain, we've had NTLM for that purpose as well. So NTLM has been around for quite a long time. If possible, you want to use Kerberos because that's generally more secure, but NTLM has been around for a long time as well, so you got to be aware of its existence. And then you definitely have to be aware of certificates. So it seems like everything these days is certificate this and certificate that. So certificates are just a quick overview. I don't think we have a slide on this, but just a real quick overview. You've got a server called a CA, a certification authority, that gives out certificates. And it's basically like a digital passport. So if you think about if you have a passport and you go to the airport and you show your passport, that's a way of identifying yourself. It's a document. It's got a lot of information about you inside. And a certificate is roughly the same concept. It's a digital ID that you have that you can present to servers that prove that you are who you say you are. For example, if you if you just browse the internet and go out to your banking website, anytime you're using HTTPS, the web server in that case is sending you back a certificate, proving that it is who it says it is, and not, say, HackerX masquerading as a fake web server, as a fake bank website. So, right. So certificates they're all based on trust, and there's a lot of cryptography involved. We don't have time to get into that, but certificates are very, very common. You'll see that throughout the course and throughout Windows 8 and Server 2012, and I guess if I had to say anything about that anymore, I'd just say make sure you understand certificates. And if you don't, go do some research on what is this all about. What is PKI, public key infrastructure? It's not too bad. It sounds a little daunting sometimes, but if you just get into it, you realize, it's not that bad. So
no, actually, a good thing to think about is that we have it all on TechNet, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I have to say that one of my favorite places to go, and I don't know if I can say this or not, but Wikipedia. This is where I always go for this, where you get the whole end-to-end. So you'll get the PKI, what it means, the certificates, the certificate authorities and the chain of trust and all of that. It's just a great place to go if you want that. We don't have a video on this, unfortunately, in MVA, but we have one coming up, so I won't be able to say anything about Wikipedia anymore after that, but we do have something where we do cover that whole end-to-end, whether you're maintaining your own certificates, how you're signed, who your CA is. There's a bit of confusion out there, especially on the server side. They address it very well on some of our server courses, but we just don't have anything encapsulated yet for MVA, and we are working on it right now.
Okay. All right, interesting. Cool. Okay, so let's keep going. The next slide talks more about Kerberos. So Kerberos, again, it's been around for a long time, but why do we still like to use it? It's an open standard. It's very, very secure, widely supported. It uses something called a ticket. Mm-hmm. It's got a ticket-based system, and it's also very time-sensitive. The tickets are time-stamped, so and the default lifetime is basically 5 minutes. So the idea is that if Hacker X gets onto your network and somehow steals a Kerberos ticket that's going in transit across the network, they've got to replay that within 5 minutes or less, and that's very, very hard to do. Mm-hmm. So Kerberos is an extremely secure protocol, and actually, even if they steal a ticket, they still have to do some more cracking of it. So they can't just steal a ticket; that's not sufficient. So they've got a very, very small window to crack the Kerberos system. So that's why it's so secure. It's extremely difficult to do that. That's about it for Kerberos for us, and then let's go on to more authentication options. So with the Windows 8.1, they're allowing you to do PIN-based logins now, as well as a picture password. So let's take a look at that. Let's just take a look at doing a picture password. They've probably done something like this on your phone. These days with phones, you can just kind of swipe with your finger, to open up your phone. And I think, as far as I know, Windows Phone and Android and iOS all support doing something like that. So now they're doing that with Windows 8.1. So we'll head out to Client 4 here, and I'm logged on as the admin. And then we'll go out to the Charms bar and Settings. And then in PC Settings, that's where you can say if you want to use a PIN or a picture password. So under PC Settings, we need to go to Accounts. And under Accounts, we see Sign In Options. And that's where you can change your password. And there we go. You can do a picture password or a PIN number. So picture password, I'll just say add there. And they ask you to type in your current password to authenticate you again, just to be absolutely certain you're the right person. Now, for a picture password, I'm not actually going to do this, but basically you just do dots, lines, or circles in any combination that you like. So it's right there on the left-hand side. A combination of circles, straight lines, and taps. And that may not sound that robust of security, but it is actually very, very difficult for someone who maybe somebody steals a person's tablet or smartphone. It is extremely difficult to get just the right gestures and motions and movement to crack somebody's picture password, unless they did shoulder surfing, where they looked over your shoulder and saw you do it. But if they haven't done that, then it's extremely difficult to replicate this. So that's where you do a picture password. We'll head back out to PC Settings here. You can also do a PIN number as well. And I actually back out in regular PC Settings. You can do a picture password right there. Okay, so let's go back out to the PowerPoint slides. Oh, there we go. And next up is just more information on biometrics. So Microsoft, every time a new version of their operating system comes out, they just keep adding more and more capabilities for biometrics. So there's something called the Windows Biometric Framework, WBF. And it's just basically saying that any third party who wants to build in a biometric authentication mechanism can probably do that with Windows 8.1. There's also better built-in support for fingerprint management. So if you have a fingerprint reader for your 8.1 device, then there's much better built-in support for that. As far as the certification exam goes, there's not much to say about biometrics. Just be aware of what is a picture password. I think that's about it, actually.
Well, I think fingerprints biometrics as well. I mean, between those two, so that would cover that.
Definitely be aware of virtual smart cards, though. That's coming up next here. So virtual smart cards. Now let's see what a regular smart card is. It's a card, and the card has a chip in it that stores cryptographic information, stores keys for cryptography. It's going to store your certificate as well. So certificates are tied to keys and all that cryptography. That's a whole can of worms. But anyway, your smart card has all this stuff in it in the chip. And normally your users would have the card, and then your computer would have to have a smart card reader. So you put the card in, reads the card, and then they're prompted for a PIN number as well. So that's a two-factor authentication, very secure. One of the problems is, though, people lose their smart cards. Another problem is you got to pay money for a smart card reader. Not all computers have that built in. So a new kind of compromise then is if you have that chip in your smart card inside your computer instead of being on a card. And that chip is called a TPM, Trusted Platform Module. So a Trusted Platform Module, we've known about this for several years now with BitLocker. That's where you can store your BitLocker keys and BitLocker recovery keys, and you can require that you have a TPM chip in your motherboard to do BitLocker. Well, now if you want to use a virtual smart card, your cryptographic information is stored in the TPM. And in a sense, your entire device is your smart card because you have to have it with you. And then when you try to log on, you still have to pop in your PIN number. So you still have to have the device and a PIN number to get in. And there you go. So a couple requirements that might be certification questions possibly is it's got to have TPM version 1.2 or higher. And be aware of the management tool, TPM, Trusted Platform Module, VSC, Virtual Smart Card Manager. So TPM, Virtual Smart Card Manager, TPM, VSC, MGR.exe. That's how you can configure all this virtual smart card business. Anything you wanted to add about virtual smart cards?
No, it's just we use them here at Microsoft. They're actually really nice to have because it's pretty much always on. So you can walk in. It's as complicated as that sort of sounded. I mean, you did the best job you could there.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the TPM module. It has to be on. And these recent laptops, they have it, so you need that for sure. But it is so much nicer than carrying around. Let's say you had a USB device where you'd plug into your laptop, and then you'd have the card, and then you'd have to have it plugged in. And many times, just working here at Microsoft, you could have your card. You're at home. You're plugged it in. You're working away, you're on the network, everything's fine, you're authenticated, then, I got to get to work, you pull the thing off and you take off and you leave your card. And so now you don't have your card to get into the building, you don't have your card to go use this virtual smart card again. It really happens more often than not. And so what this is...
Very expensive.
And it's expensive to maintain those cards too because they damage easily. It's so much nicer to have this, and it's kind of complex as this sounds. It's not that hard to configure, but it's so easy to use. It's an instant on. You can be in a coffee shop and use it right away for direct access or something like that. So I would encourage anyone to do this. It's just a return on investment is pretty high on this as opposed to the old smart cards.
Yeah. There's another reason to go to 8.1, right?
There you go, yeah.
Okay, so let's go into the next section, which is UAC. UAC has been around since Vista, and when it came out in Vista, it was a bit controversial because people were just not used to it. It's like, people fear change, so it's like this is a big change. And also going from XP to Vista, because of the new UAC model, it caused a lot of application compatibility issues. So let's go into what is UAC. So the idea behind UAC, user account control, is that everybody's logged on with a standard user account token. So even if you log on as full administrator and you put in your administrator password, you're still logged on as a standard user. Only when you need to do something that actually requires administrator privilege are you then prompted, hey, prompted for elevation is what they call it. So as an administrator, you just get prompted yes or no, do you want to elevate? As a standard user, if you try to do something requiring admin privilege, you get a prompt saying, hey, what's the admin password? And if you don't know it, you can't elevate. So that's the gist of UAC. Everybody's logged on as a standard token, but a lot of applications prior to Vista were programmed to run as administrator all the time. And that's why it caused a lot of application compatibility issues. But since Vista, there's been many, many years now, people have had plenty of time to get their applications compatible with the new model, the new UAC security model. And also with Windows 7, they reduced the amount of prompts that users got. So it's really much less intrusive than it was in Vista. So it's fantastic. Let's take a look. I'll just jump into some demos here, so we're not just talking the whole time. So there's two places to find UAC information. One is in the control panel. You can go to user accounts. So we'll just head out to client 1 here, and we'll head out to control panel, user accounts, and there you can see change user account control settings, which kind of makes sense. User account control settings, it's in users. Okay, and here's your slider bar, so you can customize how often you get notified by UAC. The default here says notify only when apps try to make changes to the computer. Don't notify when I make changes to Windows settings. But if you want to, you can say, hey, you know what? Let's always notify. Notify for apps trying to make changes, and notify when you make changes to Windows settings. Now, the idea behind they dropped the default was because usually if you're going to make Windows settings, and as long as you have enough privilege to do so, it's kind of like, well, why get prompted? But definitely if applications are trying to make changes to your computer, that could be malware, and that's the big reason you want to have this turned on. So if a virus downloads to your computer and tries to execute something that it shouldn't be doing, you'll probably get a UAC prompt like, hey, do you want to do this thing? And then you might be wondering, hey, I didn't do this. What's this prompt?
This
and
doesn't
you start
feel
investigating.
right.
It doesn't feel right. Yeah. So let's take a look at the other options then. We could drop the slider bar here and say, okay, still notify when apps try to make changes, but do not dim the desktop. And if you remember, when a UAC window pops up, the whole background turns kind of a dark gray.
Menacing.
It's menacing. And the idea there is that no other program or application can run at that moment. You have got to say yes or no, and nothing else is going to proceed until you do. And that prevents malware from, malware inventors are creative. They can create malware that has a fake UAC prompt.
That's right.
That looks like a yes or no, but it's not actually a UAC prompt. So if you don't see the background dimming, then you know, hey, this is a fake prompt. So that's one reason you want to. I would recommend you keep the dim the desktop option. And then our bottom option is just to simply turn it off altogether.
Which I wouldn't recommend.
Nobody recommends that anymore. Even for just, because, you might think to yourself, well, isn't this more of a pain for your end users? But in a way, you're protecting them from themselves too.
So it's good to put some thought into it too. You can't make everything programmatic. So it's best to leave it right there.
Let's leave it right there. Okay. And so that's to your control panel settings for UAC. The other place for UAC settings is in local security policy or group policy. Now, I did a start run GP edit MSC already, so we've got that window open. Here's our local group policy editor. And we need to go to the computer half, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, and security options. It's buried there in security options. It's buried there at the bottom. And there we have our, I think it's 9 or 10 UAC settings here. Now, would you normally go to your local group policy editor? Probably not. You probably do this in a group policy, a domain-based GPO. So that way you can have the same UAC settings for many computers at once very easily. Let's look at a few of these settings, just a few of these settings. Let's see what we got here. Look at the third one. We expand this out here. Oh, maybe not too far. Okay, third one says behavior of the elevation prompt for administrators. And the default is to prompt for consent. That's where you get the yes or no prompt if you're an administrator. Well, let's go to the next one here, the fourth one. The elevation prompt for standard users is to prompt for credentials. They don't know the credentials of a full administrator, so that they get prompted, and if they don't know it, then they cannot elevate. Now, you can change the default behavior. You can say automatically deny all elevation requests. Okay. I mean, you could also say prompt on the secure desktop. That's that dimming of the desktop.
Okay.
So just be aware. You can configure and change these options. This is not really recommended for you to do that, but you could. Admin approval mode. Normally that's enabled. I think because this is a virtual machine, we might have, or for the labs, we might have disabled that. So if admin approval mode is enabled, then we should get prompted for consent. And then obviously there's other UAC settings here. And there's nothing else to really point out necessarily, but just be aware there's all your UAC settings are here in security options. And you can put these into a group policy.
Great.
Boy, I think that's it. Let's see here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint slides. Let's see what else we got. I think we have a few screenshots of the stuff I just showed. And there we go. Okay, so we covered what is UAC. I showed you the screenshot of control panel. And I showed you, well, I didn't show you the screenshot of the prompt, but I'm sure everybody has seen these prompts before a million times. So
especially that one on the right.
You're welcome. So the left-hand side is the standard user prompt, where they're prompted for credentials. Right-hand side, you're prompted for consent for administrative users. And we talked about the slider bar. Here's a screenshot of the slider bar and control panel. And then guidelines, just use the recommended settings unless you have a compelling reason to do otherwise. You should not disable it. And you might have to educate your users as to why it's important. It's important for security as far as preventing malware from running on the system. And that's it. So we did our UAC demo there. Okay. Okay, our last section then is the Windows Firewall. And we've got several slides here, then we'll do a demo. So with a firewall, I want to say maybe in Vista or so, they changed the firewall to be a profile-based system where the firewall can behave differently depending upon what type of network you're connected to. So if you're at work and your computer is talking to a domain controller, it knows, oh, we'll call this the domain profile. And at that point, your firewall probably shields down quite a bit. That way, you as an administrator can get into all the client machines. There's less problems with that. You don't want all your clients having their firewall up 100% because then you can't get in to do any management. We've already done some demos today where we opened up a WinRM listener, for example, opening up a hole in the firewall to do some remote management. So if you're in the domain profile, it's probably shields down for the most part. Notice two other profiles, though, on the PowerPoint slide. We've got public and private. This is where you get prompted when you connect to a new network and Windows says, hey, what kind of network is this? And you basically say either you want to share and connect to other computers on that network or you don't. So if you want to share, the idea is that this is a private network, that you trust all the other machines on your network. But if you're at a coffee shop or an airport, something like that, then what you want to say is, no, don't share your information. Don't trust the people out there because there's all kinds of malicious attacks that can happen at coffee shops or airports that are actually quite easy to exploit.
Vulnerable, yeah.
So you want to say at that point that you're in the in a public network, and so then you've got shields up maximum. So let's take a look at more detail. Let's keep going here. So 2 places to configure your firewall. You've got the control panel. I'll show you that in the demo, and what's called Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. So we'll take a look at that as well. And then you can also manage firewall with GPOs. This is great because maybe you need a custom firewall rule in 1,000 computers. What do? You just go to a GPO, put the rule into your GPO, make sure it applies out to your 1,000 computers. There you go, done. So much easier than going to each system, individually to do a custom rule. Okay, and you can also manage the firewall through PowerShell, and I'll show you can also manage the firewall through netsh.exe. Okay. So let's just get into the demo here. End of the day, let's talk more action, right?
Yeah, more demo. Let's talk, right?
Okay, so our first stop will be control panel for what I call the basic firewall. Let me get rid of this blue bar. Okay, let's start from scratch here. So we're going to go to the Power User menu and open up Control Panel. Just as a reminder, the classic way now is to go to the Charms bar, Settings, and Control Panels there as well. Okay, and we've got Windows Firewall right here in the list. And I call this the basic Windows Firewall. It's just because it's not the advanced firewall.
Okay.
The advanced firewall is called Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. This one is just called Windows Firewall. They're the same thing. It's just that the quantity of settings you have available to you in Control Panel here is a bit limited. You get all of the settings in the Advanced Firewall.
Got it.
So notice here the 3 profiles. Notice we are connected right now to a domain-based network. So now the firewall's on. It's just that there's probably a lot of holes open in the firewall to allow management to come in and do group policy and different things. So we're not saying the firewall's turned off. It's just that a lot of rules will be allowing traffic through. Next up is the private networks. We're not in that profile right now, but that would be like a home network or possibly another work network where there's no domain. And then you've got a guest or public networks. That's airports, coffee shops, etc. Okay, so not much we can do here. So let's go to the left-hand side. You can say allow an app or feature through the firewall. Now the classic way the firewall has behaved since Windows XP is that all traffic you send out is allowed, and the response traffic is allowed back in. And the default behavior has always been if someone on the outside tries to initiate communication to you, that gets blocked unless you have a rule allowing that through. So it's been that way since XP. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like here in Control Panel. We're going to allow an app through the firewall. And in the Control Panel, this is only inbound rules. And that's the classic rules anyway. So we can see there's a lot of stuff that Windows sets up for you, to allow incoming. Lots and lots of things here. But if what you want to allow is not in this list, you can always say allow another app, and you browse to the executable. Also notice for each one of these, like for example, here's remote desktop. You can say, hey, let's allow remote desktop, but only if we're in the domain profile. That way, somebody in a public network cannot attempt to use remote desktop to get into your system.
Okay.
Or maybe you allow domain and private. So if you're your home network, you can do it at home, do it at work, but in a public network, don't allow that. So that's just an example. I mean, you can do whatever you like, of course. And we've talked about some of these before. And you'll notice not all the checkboxes are on all 3. So some of them are only on public, some of them are only on domain and private. Ultimately, you decide what you want to allow through your firewall. Okay, so that's the control panel. Let's cancel out of this, and let's go back to the upper left-hand corner. You can change notification settings. How often does the firewall notify you of some programs trying to get through? You can turn the firewall on or off. Let's take a look at that. You can turn the firewall on or off for the various profiles. So maybe you fully trust work, and you can say, hey, in the domain profile, let's just turn the firewall off completely. We trust the workplace at work. Normally, you don't need to do that. You can just leave it on, just have all the rules allowing traffic in. But you could if you wanted to. So you can say turn it off for that profile or one profile or another. Up to you.
Got it.
Okay. And that's about it. So let's go to the left-hand side and go to the advanced firewall. That's where you can get all the cooler settings and certification questions as well. Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. Now that's one way to get here. You can go to the control panel, basic firewall, click on advanced. Let me show you another way. I'm going to minimize this. You could also go to control panel, administrative tools. And that's another place you can find Windows Firewall with advanced security. Okay, always good to know a couple ways to get somewhere. Okay, so here's Windows Firewall with advanced security. And we have three panes here. Left-hand side is navigation pane, middle pane details pane, right-hand side is the action pane. Just a reminder, you know, why are they doing this action pane? Because all the action pane is really is just right-click, the right-click context menu. So if you right-click and it says, you know, import policy, export policy, etc., well, there you go. It's all the same stuff. They're doing that for touchscreen devices, you know, because it's hard to right-click on a touchscreen device. So if you don't have a touchscreen device and you want some more screen real estate to work with, you can just show hide action pane and give yourself a little more room to work with. Okay, so we've got inbound rules. That's where most of the action takes place here. But in, I want to say Windows, I forget, Vista or 7, one or the other. That's where they started having outbound rules. And the idea here is you can block certain programs or applications from communicating outbound. In the past, it was anybody, any program could communicate outbound. But now you can block certain things from doing that. So, for example, maybe there's a game that people at work are using a lot, maybe too much, and you know,
productivity virus.
Yeah, productivity issue, and so your boss comes to you and says, "Hey, we need to block this." You know, and so what you can do is you can find out what the port is, used for this network-based game, and then you block that outbound port, and they can't use it anymore. Or even more realistically, what if there's some kind of worm that tries to communicate outbound on a certain port number, some kind of malware that tries to communicate outbound on a certain port number, you can block that and put that in an outbound rule. So this might be a certification question and real world. Hey, you've just been infected by a new piece of malware. It's going outbound on port, I don't know, 2222. You know, you need to lock this down immediately. What can you do? Go to a group policy that links out to all your machines, create an outbound rule blocking that outbound port 2222, and then once group policy refreshes on all your computers, they're all blocking that port going outbound. So that'll stop that worm in its tracks, hopefully, right? Okay, so that's the idea behind outbound rules. Let's go ahead and do some testing here. So let me do a little test. I'm on client 1, London client 1, and let's jump over to another computer. So we're going to go to DC1, and we'll do a ping London client 1. Okay, so London client 1 is .50. Notice ping is working. Ping is working. That means that the firewall on client 1 is allowing ping through the firewall. As a slight tangent, if you recall back a few modules, there's a new way to do ping through PowerShell. Test connection to London client 1. It's kind of interesting to see how they've changed ping. Yeah. It's still ping, though. It's still better 32 bytes and still have the IP and the destination.
IPv6.
And yeah, there you go. So ping right now is working. So let's say for whatever reason you don't want it to work. We're going to make a rule, an inbound rule on client 1, and we're going to block ping. Yeah, notice here ICMP v4 is enabled and allowed 100%. So what we're going to do is make a new inbound rule. And this way we can see how do you make a rule? What if you make a custom rule? You can allow or block a program, a specific port number. There's a predefined list, but if that doesn't work for you, then you can choose custom. Let's just say custom.
All right.
Now, for this custom rule, which programs will be affected? And I'm going to say all programs that attempt to use ping will be affected by this rule. Okay. You can also, by the way, specify which services are affected, or which services use this rule. Okay. So you can get very, very granular here as far as how these rules apply. Protocol type, I'm going to say ICMP v4. Notice there's quite a few choices here. Yes. ICMP v4, that's ping uses ICMP, so ICMP v4, and we're going to customize this to say all ICMP types or a specific type, and the specific type is echo request. Yep. That is ping. But you can get very granular here. Obviously, you could even type in manual ICMP type and code numbers. It's crazy. Okay, we'll do echo request, and we'll go next. Now, which IPs does this apply to? I'm going to say anybody. Anybody trying to ping us will get blocked, and we're going to block the connection. Which profiles? So you can get very customized here. Which profiles? Oh, we'll just say all profiles. Keep this simple. We're going to say nobody is allowed to ping us.
No ping.
Block ping. Okay. We're angry about it for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, that looks pretty... oh, that's not happening.
Okay. All right, so let's try this again. Let's go back out to DC1. And let's try this ping again. Well, we'll do it the new way. Test connection. That's the new way.
There you go.
Oh, no, our ping failed. Oh, gosh. No, why?
Boy.
And you get the whole red message 4 times, too. It really fails.
Yeah, right.
Extreme failure. Okay, so that's the gist of making a rule
Very
in firewall.
Dramatic, Zach.
Very dramatic. Very red and dramatic. Okay.
That's good. Very good.
Okay, so a couple more things with the firewall. We're almost done. There was a section here I skipped called Connection Security Rules.
That's cool.
And this is a fancy way of saying IPsec. So if you want to make IPsec rules, you make connection security rules. That's especially for certification purposes. Like sometimes they just sound so generic, like connection security. What is that? And so if you've been around the industry for a while, that's IPsec. That's just the new name for IPsec. So you can right-click and make a new rule. And there's a variety of ways of doing IPsec. Now this is a can of worms, but you can do a variety of IPsec rules. And once you've set up firewall rules and connection security rules, you can go down to monitoring and see how you're doing. So you can go down to monitor firewall rules, monitor connection security rules, and security associations. That's an IPsec thing that you will see if you have connection security rules in place. So we have no stats for that because we have not set up connection security rules. Okay, now one last thing here is that let's say you've spent a lot of time customizing the firewall with all these rules, and you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. You can right-click at the very top and do import-export. So let's see, export policy. You can export all your custom rules, and you got to know this for certification purposes. Notice it's a WFW file extension. All right, I'll save this out to the desktop. So you can export all your rules to a WFW file. And we'll just see that's now on the desktop. WFW doesn't look like anything, but that's all your firewall rules. I probably should have tested this first, but I'm going to go ahead and just go for it. I'm going to delete the block ping rule. And let's go ahead and import, see if we can import that back in. So importing a policy will overwrite all of the existing rules. Okay, let's see what happens here. There's our test.wfw file. Whew. Okay, yeah, it worked.
Nice.
It's like you never want to do a demo on the fly you haven't absolutely tested, especially if you're getting videotaped, But
no,
I'm living on the edge. It's the end of the day. I'm feeling crazy. I'm living on the edge here.
Yeah.
Okay, now one last thing. I just said that. One last thing.
No, keep going.
Is let's go to PowerShell and the.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
Yeah. Let's increase the font size, make it a little easier to view what's going on here. And we will go to netsh.exe. That's a command line tool that's been around for a long time.
Blast from the past.
And we can just do netsh, and we'll do a question mark here. And you can see there's a lot of things in here. But you can configure and do import-export through the ADV firewall context.
That's right. Yeah.
netsh ADV firewall. So let's go ahead and do that. netsh ADV firewall, advanced firewall. Let's do another question mark here. What's next? Well, we could mess with connection security rules. We could do import or export. Yeah, we could do that. We could do, set would change some settings. We could show some settings. So a lot of options here. We could go to the export, though, and do that export like we did before. So now what? Now you just type in the file path. So here's an example. So this is just what we just did this in the GUI. You can do this in the command line too. I point this out because you might get tested on it. Ding, ding, ding. So be aware of that.
I always threaten to deprecate netsh.
You're
it never
right.
happens. It's always around. People love it. So
you're right, they do. And then now I might flub on this. I'm trying to remember the PowerShell commandlet for firewall. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, good enough. You can get firewall rule, set firewall rule.
Great.
Obviously, there's other things here, profiles and enable and disable rules. There you go. There you go.
Just so much nicer in PowerShell.
Yeah. So net firewall is the object for the verb verb object net firewall. Okay, I think that is it.